It all started with the cattle. I remember it clear as day, just like I remember the smell of that sharp metallic scent of blood that clung to the dry Arizona air. I was checking the herd like any other morning, just a routine walk around the ranch. But then I saw it. A steer laying in the dirt, torn up like something had just ripped it apart. Its throat was slashed clean open, but it wasn't eaten, just mutilated. I'd never seen anything like that before. Predators don't waste a meal like that. They eat everything. They don't just tear it up and leave it there. I wanted to think it was just a coyote, maybe a mountain lion. But as I kept finding more dead cattle, all mangled up in the same way, it started to feel like something else was going on. Then at night, we started hearing these howls. They weren't like anything I'd ever heard. They were like low, mournful cries that carried through the night, echoing across the land. At first, it was distant, like it was far off somewhere in the hills. But night after night, it seemed to get closer, until it sounded like it was right outside the house. My wife and kids were terrified, and honestly, so was I. The worst part was that no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the sound would just get under my skin, gnawing at me, keeping me on edge. And then one night I saw it. It was late, maybe 2 a.m. I'd gotten up for some water, and as I was walking back to bed, I caught something moving out of the corner of my eye. I looked out the window, and there by the fence was a figure. At first I thought it was a coyote, but then it rose up on 2 legs, standing as tall as a man. The light from the porch hit its face, and my stomach turned. It looked wrong. Its eyes glowed this sickly yellow glow, and its skin looked stretched like it didn't quite fit, like it was wearing something that didn't belong to it. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding, and I rushed to grab my rifle. But by the time I got outside, it was gone. I searched the area, but all I found were these huge tracks, too big for a coyote or even a wolf. They were like man's footprints, but the toes were long like claws, dug deep into the dirt. The next day I went into town to talk to an elder, an old man named Red Elk. He'd lived in these parts his whole life, and knew about things most people around here wouldn't even talk about. I told him what was happening, the cattle, the howls, the figure I'd seen. He listened, quietly nodding now and then, his face getting graver by the second. When I finished, he took a deep breath and looked me dead in the eyes. He told me, "I'm dealing with a skinwalker." A skinwalker. I felt a chill run down my spine. I'd heard stories, of course. Skinwalkers were supposed to be witches, shapeshifters, people who could turn into animals and take on their form. And they were known to be dangerous, evil, and cursed to roam the land. Red Elk told me that the Skinwalker was drawn to my land, that somehow I'd angered it, or that it was connected to something dark in the land itself. What did he say? Once it's got its eyes on you, it won't stop until it gets what it wants. And then I asked him, "What does it want?" "To see you suffer," he replied. He told me there was one way to break the curse, but it wasn't easy. I had to perform a ritual, something he said was dangerous for anyone who didn't know what they were doing. But at this point, I was desperate. My family was terrified, and I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. The next night, we started hearing the howls again. This time, though, they sounded different. It sounded angrier, like it knew we were trying to fight back. Red Elk had given me some sage to burn and a chant to recite, something meant to ward off evil. I stood out there in the middle of my ranch, the sage smoke curling up in the night air, reciting that chant over and over, hoping it would work. Then I heard something moving in the darkness. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I raised my flashlight, shining it toward the noise. And there it was. This time it was closer. Its face twisted into a snarl, its eyes glowing that awful yellow. It looked almost human, but its face was distorted like it was caught halfway between man and beast. I aimed my rifle, my hand shaking. But before I could fire, it let out this horrible scream. It was a high-pitched, piercing sound that felt like it went right through me. I froze, unable to move, and in that moment it lunged. I barely managed to jump back, stumbling over the rocks as I fired blindly into the darkness. I heard it snarl and felt something brush past me, close enough that I could smell this foul, rotting stench coming off of it. It was circling around me, moving like so fast I couldn't even aim my gun at it. Every time I thought I had it in my sights, it would dart away. Its movement was so unnatural, too. Too quick and too smooth for any animal. It was so weird. I realized then that it was toying with me. It was trying to wear me down, make me slip up. Just when I thought it was over, I heard Red Elk's voice behind me, chanting that old language. He'd shown up, probably because he knew I couldn't handle it alone. His voice was so strong and steady, and as he chanted, the Skinwalker let out another scream, but this one sounded more like pain than anger. I tried to move over towards him, but he kept chanting, his voice growing louder, more intense. I could feel it. The creature backed away slowly, almost like it was being forced, its eyes never leaving mine. Then with one last guttural growl, it turned and bolted into the darkness, vanishing into the night. Red Elk stopped chanting and looked at me. He told me it won't be back tonight, but it's not gone for good. He told me the Skinwalker would keep coming until it was fully banished, that I had to keep performing the ritual, keep burning the sage, keep chanting, or it would return. He showed me how to set up protective charms around the property, things to keep it at bay, but he warned me that the curse was strong, that it might never truly go away. That was months ago. I still hear the howls sometimes, far off in the distance. And some mornings I find those same tracks circling my house. Red Elk still checks in, still tells me to keep up with the rituals. But I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. My family's scared, and I'm just tired. The Skinwalker isn't gone. I know it's watching, waiting, just biding its time until I slip up, until I make one mistake. And then I know it'll be back to finish what it started. The sun was just setting when I finally found a spot to set up camp. I was deep in the woods in Michigan, near Manistee. Most people don't dare to hike out this far, but I liked the isolation, the peace. Just me, my tent, and the sounds of the forest. Well, that was the plan anyway. I heard stories, of course, rumors about the Dogman, a hulking, dog-like creature that was half man, half beast. People swore they'd seen it, but I've never been one to believe in monsters. I always figured it was just local folklore, stories parents told their kids to keep them out of the woods. But as I threw together my tent, I heard a low growl somewhere off to my left that made me freeze. I stood up, squinting into the dense trees, but I saw nothing. The sound was probably just a coyote, maybe a wolf, animals that were supposed to be here. But I still couldn't shake this sense of unease. I tried to shrug it off, finished setting up the camp, and tried to get comfortable by the fire. The darkness settled thick and heavy. I just leaned back against my backpack, watching the flames flicker. But every few minutes I'd catch this odd sound, a rustling in the trees or the snap of a branch. It was too quiet. There were no birds, no owls, none of the usual night sounds. It was just silence. And then I heard that growl again, but it was closer this time. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it through the woods, and at first I didn't see anything. It's just endless trees and shadows. But then I saw it. A set of yellow eyes reflecting back at me, about 50 feet away. They were low to the ground, too low for a human, but way too high for a coyote. I froze there, my heart pounding in my chest, unable to look away. Those eyes locked onto mine, just watching, waiting, maybe to see what I'll do. And then whatever it was, it just backed away, melting back into the shadows. I tried to shake it off as just my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down I knew something wasn't right. I barely slept. And by dawn, I was ready to pack up and head out. But when I stepped outside my tent, my blood went cold. There were tracks all around my campsite. They were huge, like paw prints, but much, much larger, and I could see the outline of claws. They circled my tent, leading off into the trees. Whatever had been out there, it had been watching me all night. Against my better judgment, I decided to follow the tracks just to see. Maybe it was a bear, I told myself. Just a big old bear. But as I moved deeper into the woods, the prints became more defined. The tracks started to look less like an animal and more like something that walked on two legs. I shook myself, telling myself I was imagining things. But then I heard it. A low guttural growl that sent a chill straight down my spine. I turned slowly and there it was, maybe 30 feet away, and it was massive, standing on two legs but hunched forward with broad shoulders and a body covered in thick matted fur. Its face was long and dog-like, with a snout and ears that were perked up, alert. But the eyes, those eyes were intelligent, focused, like it knew exactly what I was thinking. I stumbled back, barely able to breathe. My instinct screamed at me to run, but something about the way it was watching me kept me rooted in place. It took a step forward, and I swear I saw its lips curl back, revealing rows of sharp yellow teeth. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This thing wasn't a bear or a wolf, or anything else I'd ever heard of. The first thing that came to mind was it was the Dogman. All those stories were actually true. I don't remember making the decision to run, but suddenly my legs were moving, carrying me as fast as they could through the trees. Branches whipped at my face, the underbrush clawing at my legs, but I didn't stop. Behind me, I could hear it crashing through the forest, gaining on me. I chanced to look back and my heart sank. It was closing the distance, running on all fours now, its long limbs propelling it forward with terrifying speed. There was no way I could outrun it. I stumbled, nearly falling, and then I spotted a massive tree laying on its side. Without thinking, I dove behind it, pressing myself flat up against the ground, trying to control my breathing. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment there was only silence. I lay there, not daring to move, every muscle tensed. And then I heard it. The soft padding of feet, moving closer, slowly as if it were sniffing me out. I held my breath, waiting. I could feel its presence on the other side of the tree. And then it spoke. Not in words exactly, but this low growl sound that sounded almost like a voice. And it was deep and primal. Something that didn't belong in this world. It said something that made my skin crawl. A noise that almost sounded like "found you." I bit down on my lip, tasting blood, trying to keep from screaming. Seconds felt like hours, and then I heard it move away, its footsteps fading into the distance. I waited until I was sure it was gone before I slowly rose, my heart still pounding in my chest. I didn't dare go back to my campsite. I had to keep moving, put as much distance between myself and that creature as I could. I pushed myself forward, moving as quickly and quietly as possible. The woods seemed darker, more sinister. Every snap of a branch made me jump. Every shadow seemed to shift and move. But I kept going, refusing to look back. Hours later, I stumbled out of the woods, practically collapsing when I saw my car. I didn't look back as I threw my stuff inside and sped out of there, my hands shaking the entire drive home. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. I couldn't get those eyes out of my head. Those yellow, knowing eyes that had watched me, tracked me, hunted me. I never went back to those woods. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, waiting and watching, maybe even following. And sometimes late at night, I swear I can hear that low growl outside my window, reminding me that it's never really gone. People tell me it was a bear, a wolf, some kind of trick of the mind. But I know what I saw. The Dogman is real. And it's out there lurking in the woods, waiting for its next victim. There's a reason I don't tell this story very often, and it's because I feel like no one ever believes me. So what's the point? It was supposed to be just a joke, like something we could brag about later. We'd all heard the stories about Goatman's bridge, of course, who hasn't? It's this old abandoned bridge out in the middle of nowhere, on the edge of town. And people say it's haunted by the Goatman, a half-human, half-goat creature that's been stalking the area for decades, maybe even longer. They say he's got horns like a ram, and eyes that shine red in the dark. And if you go out there at night, he'll make you his next victim. I never believed it. None of us did. But like I said, we thought it would be a joke. Just a quick trip to the bridge, maybe a few creepy photos for Instagram, and then back to the car for a laugh. It was me, Jake, Sarah, and Tim. We'd all grown up together, and we were all always daring each other to do stupid things, but this was different. It was late, it was just past midnight when we parked on the dirt road, about a quarter mile from the bridge. I remember stepping out of the car and feeling a chill, like the air was different out there. The trees seemed to press in closer, and the silence was heavy, thick. I remember hearing Jake laughing, and then he shoved me forward, telling me not to chicken out now. I guess he saw a look on my face when we stepped out. Or maybe he felt it too, I don't know. We walked towards the bridge, flashlights in hand. The only sound I could remember was just hearing our footsteps crunching on the gravel. When we reached the bridge, I got a good look at it up close. It was old, way older than I'd thought. The wood was all rotting, splintered in places, and rusty metal beams creaked as the wind blew. There were strange markings all over it, some carved into the wood, and others painted in like a faded red that looked a little too much like dried blood. Sarah pulled out her phone, grinning, and I remember her saying, "So who's ready to meet the Goatman?" I didn't laugh. And then Jake, smirking, said, "Well, let's find out." And he pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. He said it was this ritual he found online. Something about calling the Goatman, asking him to show himself, or make his presence known. And he started reading it. Sarah started laughing, but I just had this bad feeling. And right as he finished the words, a silence settled over us, deeper than before. It was like the whole world had just stopped. All of us just kind of stood there, not saying anything or moving. We were just standing there, frozen. There was this feeling like someone was watching us. Like something was lurking just beyond the edge of our flashlights. And then Sarah whispered, asking if we'd heard something. We all stayed quiet, straining our ears, trying to hear whatever it was she said she heard. And at first, I didn't hear anything. But then faintly, I caught it. Soft, rhythmic sound of hooves on wood, like clop, 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 clop. Tim said it must be a deer or something. I'm sure he was freaking out too, and he was just trying to rationalize it. But the footsteps kept growing louder, closer. They sounded heavy, way too heavy for a deer. Too deliberate, almost like someone or something was walking on two legs. I suggested we go. But when I turned to leave, the bridge stretched on longer than it had been, disappearing into the darkness. I don't remember us walking that far onto the bridge. And I also couldn't see the car. The car was nowhere in sight. So that just freaked me out even more. The clopping sound stopped, and silence fell over us like a thick blanket. And then I felt something cold brush up against my arm, and I turned, shining my flashlight into the shadows, but nothing. But that didn't stop the feeling like something was right there, just out of sight, breathing down our necks. I remember hearing Jake and Sarah whisper something, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. And then, somewhere in the darkness, I heard it. It was a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate the air around us. My stomach clenched, and I saw Sarah's face go pale. The growl grew louder, and then without warning, something let out a shriek that split the night. A scream so high-pitched and twisted that it almost sounded human. But not quite. I took off running, and I heard the others follow behind me. But no matter how fast we ran, the bridge just kept stretching on endlessly, like we were trapped in some nightmare loop. And then we saw it. A figure standing in the shadows at the end of the bridge. It was just barely visible in the dim light, like a silhouette almost. It was tall, maybe even 7 or 8 feet, with horns curling up from its head. Its eyes glowed an unnatural red like you would not believe. It looked like they were like little LEDs. And then it stepped forward. I could see its twisted body. It looked part human and part something else. It had long, clawed fingers and a mouth that stretched into a grin way too wide, filled with sharp, glistening teeth. We were all frozen, staring at it. And then the creature tilted its head, almost like it was mocking us, studying us, deciding which of us to take first. And then it lunged. We scattered, each of us sprinting in different directions, just trying to get away. I could hear the others screaming, the sounds blending together in my head. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. I tripped, hitting the wood hard, and the taste of blood filling my mouth. I scrambled to get back up, my flashlight spinning away, leaving me in near darkness. I felt something brush up against my leg, and when I looked down I saw hoof marks burned into the wood next to me, like something incredibly hot had just walked by. The sound of hooves grew louder, closing in from every direction. I grabbed my flashlight, shining it around frantically. For a second, I caught sight of it again, standing just a few feet away, staring at me with those awful red eyes. Its face was twisted into a sick grin, and it raised one clawed hand, motioning for me to come closer, like it was inviting me. I turned and ran, not caring if I was running in circles, not caring where I ended up as long as it wasn't near that thing. The hoofs followed, relentless, never slowing down. I felt like I could feel its breath on the back of my neck, hear its low growling laugh as it chased me, enjoying the hunt. Suddenly, I broke through the darkness and stumbled off the bridge, collapsing onto the dirt road. The others were there too, gasping for breath. All of us looking back at the bridge. But the Goatman was gone. The bridge was silent, almost peaceful, like nothing even happened. We didn't speak, we just got in the car and drove, too shaken to even look at each other. But as we sped away, I glanced out the window back at the bridge. And there, just for a split second, I saw it again. A tall, shadowy figure, standing in the middle of the bridge, watching us. Its red eyes burning in the darkness. I've heard people say that once you summon the Goatman, you can't escape him. That he latches onto you, follows you, waits for you. And every now and then I swear I catch a glimpse of him out of the corner of my eye. A shadow that's too tall. A flicker of red eyes just as I'm drifting off to sleep. They say it's just an urban legend. But if you believe this story, then you know it's not. Every time I close my eyes, I'm afraid I'll see him standing there again, waiting for me to finish what we started.